is that a, you know, a distinction without a difference, or is that actually of importance?
I don't think it's too much splitting hairs. And I think it's interesting with Rashi, it's not in Etz Chaim as that. Etz Chaim just says, I am, which I guess the text there says as well. If he said, he didn't say I am Esau. I mean, when I said there are levels of deception, but there's also dissembling in here, that it's not, the splitting hairs allows Jacob, or allows rabbis to not castigate Jacob's behavior as severely as it might otherwise.
Right.
But in the beginning, he says, I am Esau, your firstborn.
Right. So
right.
That's true.
Interestingly, Rashi does not comment on that verse. Right. Anybody else? Yeah. Panina.
Yes,
Okay. I think he knew right away. You don't have to touch somebody. You can recognize it even by the way they walk, by the way they move. And then he feels it and he figures that Yaakov wouldn't do it by himself because Rivka helped him. And then in the end, Jacob gives him wine. It's like to numb the whole feeling of what was going on there. And because he wasn't, he may have been blind, but I don't think he was stupid. He knew already what's going on. And the fact that he gave him in the end wine, I think it tells you that everybody around there knew what's going on.
It's a wonderful point. We're going to get that, which is.
That's what I feel. He knew that Rebecca was in it, and he probably trusted her judgment, that she even thought that Jacob would be more suitable to continue the whole lineage.
Yes.
And take upon himself the responsibility. And Jacob went along with it, and in the end, he knew that it's probably.
Well, I think that's the fascinating point, right? I'm guessing there's not a single one of us here with kids, with more than one kid, who, you know, blind, deaf, drunk, wouldn't be able to distinguish between the two of them.
Sure. Right.
So that, I think, raises an interesting point. And to that question, I'm going to just share this next text, and then we'll keep going. Right. This is from a wonderful Torah commentary that the Reform movement published about maybe 15 years ago now, called the Torah Woman's Commentary, kind of reflecting the fact that the vast majority of Torah commentary for all of Jewish history has been from a male perspective, and a bunch of really brilliant female scholars got together and produced a really beautiful resource. And that is exactly the point, as a mother would, right? That they highlight, saying, right, that Isaac is not only physically blind, but on a deeper level, he refuses to recognize what would be clear to any parent. Can his knowledge of his children truly be so superficial that he can only distinguish between them physically? Right. There was Miriam, I think I saw your hand up.
I just wanted to say that I'm thinking about it like for one of the first times, even though I've read it many times. He didn't bother to disguise his voice.
Right.
Very interesting. Very easy to put some hairy sweater or something over his arms. Yeah. Do you think he wanted to be recognized in a way? Or just that he didn't disguise his voice is interesting enough.
Yeah.
He didn't try to.
Yeah. I think he probably thought that the physical piece was enough. And again, I mean, in the verses prior to what I brought to look at today, right? It's Jacob sort of gets cast as this, willing participant, but almost pawn in his mother's sort of game, right? She orchestrates and she tells him what to do. That she doesn't consider the voice. Jeff, I see your hand. Good to see you.
Thank you. I think if you combine two portions that you've just read, the one word that stands out, in addition to Miriam's comment and others, is that Isaac was not fooled in any way. And the use of the word that Yaakov replies, Adonai sent me, is the key, that Isaac accepts this deception knowingly because it's referenced in an indirect way that this is God's will, that God sent me. It's kind of a foreshadowing of the entire purposes of this transaction. It says, Adonai, your God sent me, good speed. And in essence, Isaac is aware, for whatever reason, either physical or spiritually, that this is God's will in this transaction,
Interesting.
In this event.
So interesting. I agree. I absolutely agree with the premise. I will just highlight that response when Jacob tells Isaac that God sent him, good speed. That's in response, and we're going to touch on this in a minute. That's in response to Isaac's question. So Isaac asks Esau to go hunt and get him some food, right? Get him some venison, because Isaac likes the meat that that Esau hunts. So he asks Esau to go bring him some meat to eat, and comes back very quickly with the meat. And asks, how did this happen, right? How is it that you found it so quickly, my son? And his response is that, God helped me, and God sent me good speed for this to happen quickly for me. So it's not quite that God sent him, to get this blessing, but I do agree that bringing God into the equation, I think, and some aspect of, divine will potentially, certainly changes it. Yeah, Penina.
Rashi, on the end of the page, Rashi did comment on it. He said, he didn't say, I am Esau. He just said, it's me.
Right.
So there is a comment there that he told him, it's me. It's whatever it is that you think it is. It's me.
Right. It's whatever you want. Yeah. Yes.
Well, my feeling is that both parents were complicit because they learned, not because of who came first out of the womb, but that they learned the character of their children. And Esau was so foolish that he would trade his birthright for a bowl of soup,
right,
would indicate that he was impulsive and not reflective, not being concerned about the consequences. And both parents may have often said, oh, too bad Jacob wasn't the first one out of the womb.
Right. Absolutely. Right.
And
absolutely.
they'd be looking for an excuse.
Yep.
To pass it on to Jacob.
Every description of the characters of Esau goes along with the idea that Rebekah knew, either through her own prophecy or through the words of those that say, this line must come through Yaakov and not Esau, because he's not fit to be the progenitor of this people.
Judith, Sadie?
Susan?
Okay. Yes. My translation says, not because the Lord sent me, but because the Lord, your God, granted me good fortune, which would suggest, it's got multiple implications here, but the good fortune to get the venison, the meat so quickly. And not that sent me to you, but good fortune here can be expanded to say, actually, I'm going to get your blessing.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the Hebrew. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, this is a little bit misleading, this translation. I will confess I grabbed it from somewhere. Yeah. So since we're already talking about so that verse, this is the midrash on that verse, right? Isaac then says to his son, how is it that you're able to find game so quickly, my son, right? And this gets to the idea that we've talked about, that, okay, so maybe Isaac, is not a fool, right? Isaac's not a fool. So the rabbis say, how is it you're say that the moment that Jacob says, God made it happen for me, Isaac says to himself, I know this isn't Esau. Because Esau would never invoke the name of God.
Right.
Right. And that at that exact moment, Isaac knew this is Jacob. Because Esau would never speak like that. Esau would never talk about God. Right. Esau would say, because I'm a really great hunter. That's how, Dad, or whatever. Right. So that's when Isaac knows, and that the implication from the Midrash is that, and the rabbi's interpretations, and from that point on, Isaac knows full well what he's doing, right? He's not a fool, to say the least. So this is a lovely piece, I think, from Rabbi Norman Cohen, who's alive and well, as a rabbi in New York. And he writes that if Isaac did recognize Jacob, why then is he pictured as asking Jacob this lengthy series of repetitive questions about his identity, right? Why the whole kind of interrogation, right? Who are you, my son? Come closer. Let me feel you. Are you really Esau or not, right? Why all of this if he's already figured out, that it's Jacob, right? And his suggestion is that these piercing questions have another purpose. When Isaac asks Jacob, Mi ata bani, who are you, my son? He's giving him the opportunity to come clean, right? He's giving him the opportunity to acknowledge who he is, what he's doing, since the decision's already made as to who will receive the blessing. He's really asking, like, who are you? What are you made of? What is your makeup? What is your essential nature? Are you Jacob or Esau or both?
Now, wouldn't it have been a cleaner picture if Jacob said, Dad, Esau has already passed this on to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm just waiting for you to endorse it to make it all legit. Mm. Then we wouldn't.
Then we wouldn't be, because then we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it, right? That's the beauty, right? The reason it's so convoluted, and I say that I think this is true, right? And many of you have heard me say this time and time again. This is just one more example of the Torah does not paint pictures of perfect families, to say the least, right? Two parents who pick favorites, two siblings who are fiercely rivalrous against each other, right? Deception between the husband and the wife and the kids. Because it's a family, hopefully not quite like yours or mine, but it's a real family, and every family has their mushagas, and it's not clean for any of us. So I think that you're right. It would be a lot simpler if what's interesting to me about it is it seems to take the deal, in essence, that Jacob and Esau made with one another out of the equation, right? What's the point of that deal if then he subsequently has to deceive Isaac into actually giving him the blessing, right?
Was it also that it was very hard in the community to say, I'm not going to follow the law that the firstborn gets the birthright?
Most likely, right? Although, if we fast forward to the end of Jacob's life, he does just that with Ephraim and Manasseh, with Joseph's sons, right? And giving them a blessing, and he, not to get into the whole other Torah portion, but he purposefully gives the blessing to the younger, right? Not the older, to the point where Joseph thinks that Jacob is old and senile, and actually moves his hands and corrects him, and Jacob is very clear that no, he's doing what he wants to do and what he believes is right. And some have suggested that that's as a repair, as it were, for this whole scenario to kind of balance it or right the wrong. Yeah, Susan.
Yes. And I think, well, first of all, there were two different things. One was the birthright, although they're related. The second one was what he's asking for now is the blessing. And I'm not sure, right. One comes before the other, but they're
Yes.
not exactly the same. And the other thing is why think this is very good by Rabbi Cohen about giving I love that, giving Jacob a chance to say, yeah, not really and even my mother put me up to it. But when there are themes in the Torah, which we're finding out, this plays itself out by how many times Jacob himself was deceived and by family members. It goes with Lavan, the two women on the night, and then even Rachel stealing the idols. He's deceived a lot of times. So maybe they're doing this to say, look okay, we're setting up this character, and they're going to be, it's going to play itself out that he's going to be deceived.
Right. You look right. I think the most famous of which, is the whole debacle with marrying Leah before Rachel, right? So maybe the stage is set for him to sort of be this dupe or a putz kind of, perhaps. Yeah, Sukasa.
It's kind of obvious that that Esau sold his birthright. So there must be commentary as to what people thought about it. What are some of the commentary? How do they explain it? So, that Jacob doesn't come clean.
Well, the idea is, and I don't have that in front of me, but the idea is I think that that I don't want to say it's not his to sell, right? But it's sort of like doing a business deal and then the state attorney general has to sign off on it, right? That you can make an agreement, but you may or may not be the sole decider, right? So, is it actually up to Esau to give it away? Does he actually have that authority to give it away, right? It's Isaac's blessing to give, right?
And it's the community way to do it.
It's the norm. It's the social norm. Absolutely, right? So I'm going to push this a little further to actually the last text, because I think it radically changed my entire perception of the story. I think it may do that for a lot of us, and I think it'll spark a lot of conversation. So I'll share it, and then we'll read it on the other side. And it just, I think, beautifully happens to be from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who sadly died about 2 weeks ago, but was the chief rabbi of the UK for many years. An amazing, brilliant guy. So he says that Isaac fully understood the nature of his two sons. He loved Esau, but this did not blind him to the fact that Jacob would be the heir of the covenant. Okay? And therefore, Isaac prepared two sets of blessings, one for Esau, the other for Jacob. He blessed Esau with what comes right after this, okay? He blesses Esau with the gifts he felt he would appreciate, wealth and power. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness and abundance of grain and new wine. That's wealth. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. That is power. These are not the covenantal blessings. Okay, now I'm going to hide that for a second. So what happens right after the piece of the text, right? The blessing that Isaac gives to Jacob, if we're imagining deception, believing that he is Esau, is this blessing, right? About, wealth and power. And Rabbi Sachs is about to reference this. If you think about the blessings that God gives to Abraham and to Isaac, right? They're about, your descendants will be as many as the stars in the sky and the sands, right? It's about, you're going to have a promised land. It's about nationhood. It's about peoplehood. It's not about money and power, right? That is this blessing that clearly fits Esau, that Isaac gives, thinking it's Esau. Sachs goes on. The covenantal blessings, as I just shared, that God has given Abraham and Isaac were completely different. They were about children and land. it is this blessing that Isaac later gives to Jacob when he leaves home a couple verses later, right? May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples, that is, children. May God give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham so that you may take possession of the land where you now reside as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham, that is land. This was the blessing Isaac had intended for Jacob all along. There was no need for the deceit and the disguise, right? The blessing, Sachs's point, to bottom line it, right? The blessing that God gives, the blessing that Isaac gives to who he thinks is Esau is not actually the covenantal blessing. It's this blessing about power and money, right? The blessing that he gives knowingly to Jacob when Jacob runs away fearful for his life and Esau's retribution, that's the covenantal blessing, right? That there actually was enough for each of them, and that Isaac was giving each child a blessing that was appropriate for them. Thoughts? Jeff, I see your hand.
In summary, there are two facts that relate to the later stories that we read in Deuteronomy and the warnings that they beget. Both Esau and Ishmael share a common characteristic. And that common characteristic that they believed in their own self-power without the ability or knowledge or care to give God the credit for the welfare and the good things in their life. In other words, the warning that we hear later is that don't be deceived in the land of Israel, that it's by your hands alone that you succeed. Do not forget God. And in other words, both Esau and Ishmael share that characteristics of self-important egotism and lack of respect or faith in God. And that, whether you want to call it a foreshadowing, it says something about the entire premise that all we are, all we have, and all we need comes from God and not from our own works and hands. So the few people who share prophecy and are aware of that, their characteristic is exactly opposite. Even though they're bad people and mature into better people throughout the stories, they share that common characteristic that they know that everything stems from God, versus those who lose the blessings, lose the birthright, are those who don't warrant it because they don't have an intrinsic belief or essence of God.
It's a very interesting point for two reasons, Jeff. I think one, because Esau, by the way, when a little bit later, when he leaves home, where does he go? He goes and hangs out with Ishmael, the rabbis think. But your point of sort of not recognizing God's, place in the equation, right? It's not your power alone. At least resonates with me because, and some of you have heard me say this before or give this sermon before. I would argue that that's actually the mistake that Moses makes that stops him from ever making it into the land of Israel, right? In the whole vignette with the rock and the water, and the typical idea being that God says, go speak to the rock, and Moses is so frustrated with the people and they're fetching and complaining, right, that he stands up there and he hits the rock, and that's his, the sin of anger, and that's why he's kept out of the land. I disagree with that. I think that it's because he stands up there with his brother yelling at the people, and he says to them, listen, you rabble, do you want us to get you water from this rock? And that is the error, right? The ego. Do you want me to get you water from this rock? When it's not Moses getting him water from the rock, it's God, right? And Moses, in essence, taking credit for that which is God's work, not his, is what ultimately, keeps him out. Susan.
Yes, and in response to taking Jeff's comment for the prophets, women in this Bible story, in these Bible stories, seem to know that they're sent by God. So Rebecca does what she's doing because she believes that God led her to have Jacob as the leader. And when Leah has all those children, she thanks God for it. You know, there's that it's not just, you know, their sexual relationships, but it was God. And Rachel seems to have that same thing too, even Tamar. I mean, later on, although I don't know that she's Jewish, but so I think that women instinctually have this feeling in contradistinction to the men that Jeff raised. Just carrying that line forward if you want to make a deal.
Remember, who gets the Torah at Sinai first? And God's comment is that he gives that knowledge first to women, because women have the power to translate it to the families and carry it forward through the generations, unlike the hunter-gatherer men of the tribe who believe in the law, but can't empathize with the need for the law. So that women are given a very special place right from the beginning.
I think it also fits with this idea, right, in this story of Jacob being, you know, the mama's boy, not in a bad or derogatory sense, right? But the one that is close to his mother, and Esau is the one who's out there hunting and doing whatever, and that Jacob is the one who is the one through whom the covenant, you know, continues. I think it kind of fosters that same narrative. So, you know, needless to say, there's a lot here, and I think hopefully just a slightly different way to think about this in terms of, you know, what was Isaac complacent in this? Was he a willing participant in this? And for me, this, which I never thought about before until I came across that piece by Rabbi Sachs, that if you look at the text, there's two different blessings, and the one that he actually gives, believing that it's Esau, isn't the covenantal blessing that we would ordinarily imagine it to be. That's the one that he gives, you know, in the open, as it were, to Jacob. So a little bit of food for thought. I'm led to believe, Panina, that it is your birthday today.
Whoa.
Happy birthday. Am I allowed to say how old? Am I allowed to say how you're muted? Am I allowed to say how old?
Daughter told us how old she is.
She
Wrote it down.
It's written down.
Talia's note gave it away.
I couldn't tell if that was just to me or to everybody. But so Talia, it's a great idea. Why don't we all sing happy birthday? It'll be this horribly imperfect Zoom thing where it'll be out of sync, but I think that's part of the beauty of it. All right, 1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Panina. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Now, Gurney won't be taking us for the choir.
It's beautiful. Thank you. תודה רבה. Okay, I have something to tell you guys that will bring us all to today with all this my thought. When I was learning Tanakh, I remember that my rabbi, my teacher, told me that דיברה תורה בלשון בני אדם. The Torah spoke in a language of people. In other words, it represents people in every generation. The stories are there to reflect a situation that arrives to people, that happens to people. And if you think of today, people have trust. How many times you have the one who's going to execute the trust as the firstborn, and then in my case, he passed away. So I had to assign somebody else. So usually, let's say, God should watch all of you, that it should never happen to you. But you have a son or a daughter that you think they'll do a good job, but the other one might do an excellent job. So you change it. You go and you change and you do whatever it is that you think that the one who is going to be the fit to execute it will do it. And you just go ahead and do it. So it's the same thing if it was God knows how many generations before us. But the Torah is representing situations that you meet in your own life every day. And you're supposed to learn from them, either ignore it, consider it, or go by it, or whatever it is that you choose to do. But the sentence, Dibra Torah bilshon bnei Adam, the Torah spoke in the language of people. That's to understand that you take from it whatever it is that you choose to take from it and execute it the way you want to. That's it.
It's a beautiful thought, Panina, and a beautiful note to end on. I couldn't say it any better myself. It kind of reminds me of the saying that, you know, we see the world, and I would say many times Torah, not as it is, but as we are. And that's, I think, part of the beauty of it, and why, you know, here we are, however many thousands of years later, still reading and talking about the same thing, right? So thank you, everybody, for making a little time for Torah today.
Thank you,
Shabbat
Rabbi.
Shalom. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I was telling
You too, all of you.
Telling our first graders today that Thanksgiving feels like such a Jewish holiday, even though it's not. And I think that's because it feels like part Shabbat dinner, and you know, expressing gratitude and thankfulness is such a deep part of what it is to be a Jew. So a meaningful and wonderful and safe Thanksgiving to everybody as well. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
In Judaism, we 52 Thanksgivings. Every Shabbat is a Thanksgiving.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay. Shalom.
Happy birthday, Panina.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.